Part 1. The Michigan night wind seeped through the window cracks like icy fingers, numbing my hands and leaving them dry and chapped. The damp metallic smell from the old sandwich toaster in the corner of the lobby mingled with the odor of stale grease, forming an unpleasant stench that clung to my throat. I sat behind the reception desk of the Timberline Motel, trying to get used to the bone-chilling cold of this northern lake region. The Vacancy sign in the parking lot buzzed erratically in the wind, its orange light flickering unevenly as if something trapped inside the bulb was struggling. The old security camera screen in front of me displayed blurry black and white images of the parking lot. Rainwater pooled, glistening under the sodium lights, reflecting a greasy sheen that made everything look as though it were covered in a viscous film. This was the first night of my probationary week. Evan Cole, 29, had just lost his job in Detroit and was desperately in need of a new one, any job. I glanced at the wall clock, 11:15 p.m., nearly 8 more hours until my shift ended. Harlan Whale, the motel owner with a gaunt face and hazy eyes that looked as if he never got enough sleep, had given me fairly simple instructions. Check vacant rooms, keep records, and make sure customers didn't complain. Just do that, he said in a voice raspy like sandpaper. Don't be curious, don't meddle in things that aren't your business. Get through this week and I'll sign a long-term contract. I needed this job. My bank account was dwindling, and the thought of moving back in with my mother at almost 30 chilled me more than the Michigan cold. So I nodded, took the heavy bunch of keys from his hand, and braced myself for a long, dull night. But from the very beginning, something felt off. The first smell I noticed wasn't from the toaster or the usual musty odor of an old motel. It wafted from the ventilation shaft near the reception desk, a greasy, fishy smell like wet leather left too close to a heater. Not exactly rotten, but something was wrong, unnatural. It reminded me of a tannery, but mixed with something more organic, more alive. The dryer in the laundry basement has a bit of an issue, Harlan explained when he saw me wrinkle my nose. He handed me a small brass key. But don't go down there when the hot fan is running, understand? Why? I asked, trying to keep my voice normal even as my stomach began to knot. Harlan looked at me, his gaze piercing. The fan's broken, can blow out unusual hot air. Safety first. But the way he spoke, the way his eyes avoided mine when he mentioned the laundry basement, told me that wasn't the whole truth. I nodded, putting the key in my pocket with the others. The cold metal clinked against itself, creating a dry, rustling sound. Harlan walked towards the door, stopping for a moment. Oh, Mari's Vega will be here in about half an hour. She handles the night cleaning. She'll show you everything you need to know. Then he left, leaving me alone with the buzzing of the sign and the strange, wet leather smell from the ventilation system. Half an hour passed in tense silence. I tried to get familiar with the old-fashioned room registration system, a strange combination of an outdated computer and a handwritten ledger. Harlan emphasized using both to be sure, he said. The paper ledger was thick, with a worn brown leather cover and edges stained with something that looked like dried glue. I was recording the status of the rooms when the main door swung open. Mari's Vega entered, pushing a cart of dirty linen. She was a young woman, perhaps in her 20s, with long black hair tied neatly and dark brown eyes that seemed perpetually alert. She wore the gray uniform of the motel staff, but there was something in her careful, calculated movements that made me think she wasn't just a simple housekeeper. "You're Evan?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. When I nodded, she approached the counter. "I heard Harlan say you're new. There are a few things you need to know about this place." She took a roll of red adhesive tape from her cart and placed it on the counter. "First, tape this around the door frame. The door's a bit drafty, lets in the wind." I looked at the tape, then at her. "Just because of the wind?" Mari's was silent for a moment, her eyes darting towards the camera screen. "If you hear 3 even knocks on the door in the middle of the night, don't answer it. Don't open the door, don't even look through the peephole." "Why?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. She looked at me, her gaze serious, chilling. "It's not always the wind, Evan, and it's not always people." A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to lighten the mood with a laugh. "Come on, this is Michigan, not a horror movie." Mari's didn't smile. She just pointed to the flickering sign outside the window. "You see how it blinks? That's not just an old bulb. Some nights, when the wind changes direction, everything here changes. They say Timberline Motel sits on the border of something. I don't know what, but I know enough to be careful." She pushed her cart towards the hallway but stopped and turned back. "Also, Room 24 at the end of the first floor hallway is listed as a room without a window. If you hear any noise from inside, don't check it. Leave clean towels outside the door if they ask, but never look inside. But if there are guests. There are no guests in room 24, she cut me off, her voice like a knife. At least not the kind you'd think. Then she disappeared into the dark hallway, leaving me with my mind reeling and my stomach tightening with anxiety. I looked at the roll of red tape, then down at the ledger. On the page, someone had scribbled a symbol in ballpoint pen. 3 concentric, distorted curves, like faded, stitched lines, but the strokes were deep, as if the person who drew them had pressed down with all their might. Around 2:00 a.m., things started to get weird. I was reviewing last month's revenue report when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the normal electronic chime, but a harsh metallic clang, as if someone was striking a metal bar forcefully. I looked up through the glass door. A man stood outside in the weak light of the porch lamp. He wore a woolen cap pulled low, obscuring half his face, and his coat collar was turned up. The strange thing was, even though the wind outside was howling, I could hear it clearly through the cracks. His clothes weren't fluttering at all. They hung motionless as if in a vacuum. I reluctantly got up to open the door. A blast of cold wind rushed in, but the man stood still as a statue. "Can I help you?" My voice was hoarser than I intended. He lifted his head slightly, just enough for me to see the lower half of his face. Something was wrong with the arrangement of his features. His nose seemed slightly off-center, his lips didn't quite meet correctly, and his chin jutted out at an odd angle, as if someone had tried to piece a face together from separate parts and hadn't quite succeeded. "Got a razor?" His voice was slow, each word uttered as if he had to think carefully before pronouncing it. The sound was distorted, like it came through a cheap, broken speaker, both high-pitched and low at the same time. "Razor?" I repeated, trying not to stare at his bizarre face. "A razor?" he repeated even slower, as if teaching a child to speak. The smell emanating from him wasn't a normal body odor, but a sickly sweet stench, like meat left too long in a broken refrigerator. I'll check the storeroom," I said, backing away. "Wait here." I didn't want to turn my back on him, but I couldn't just stand there staring. I hurried into the room behind the counter, my heart pounding. The storeroom was filled with basic toiletries, soap, shampoo, and luckily, a few disposable razors still in their packaging. When I returned, the man had moved into the lobby. He stood right against the glass door, his hands pressed against the pane. Greasy streaks from his palms were etched onto the glass, but they weren't like normal human handprints. They had a strange texture, as if the fingerprints ran in the wrong direction, twisting into unnatural patterns. "Here," I handed him the razor, trying to maintain a safe distance. $1.50. He took the razor, his fingers lightly brushing mine. His skin was ice cold and felt unnaturally smooth, like touching wet plastic. He placed a few crumpled dollar bills on the counter. "Thanks," he said, then turned and left. I watched him through the glass door as he stepped outside. Under the sodium lights of the parking lot, his shadow didn't move correctly. It was cast at a strange angle, as if illuminated by a different light source. And as he walked further away, I could see his coat puffing up and deflating rhythmically, as if something beneath it was breathing. I looked back at the camera screen, trying to follow him, but on the screen where he had just passed, there was only a blurry black streak, like a piece of black nylon gliding by. And in the corner of the screen, I saw something that made my heart stop. A white sheet, hanging somewhere out of the camera's view, was puffing up and deflating. Even though I knew for cert, there was no clothesline in that area. The desk phone suddenly rang shrilly, making me almost jump out of my chair. But when I looked down, there was no incoming call. The small bell on the old phone still vibrated softly, automatically, as if an invisible hand had tapped it. The wet leather smell from the ventilation system suddenly intensified, almost suffocating. I had to open the window for air, but the cold wind blowing in only made the smell denser, mixing with a new odor salt and something metallic, like blood. I decided I had to do something, at least tape up the storeroom door as Mari's had instructed. I took the red roll of tape and began sealing it around the door frame. The tape clung to my hands strangely, leaving sticky residue as I pulled it off. Under the fluorescent lights, the tape's edge gleamed with an unnatural, dark red, like dried tendons. When I finished taping and returned to the desk, the ledger had been opened to a different page. I was certain I had closed it, but now it was open to a middle page where old guest names were listed. Some names were crossed out with black ink, the smudged ink resembling dried bloodstains. And at the bottom of the page, written in shaky handwriting, was a note: "They've started the shift change. Don't let them know your real name." I swallowed hard, looking around the deserted lobby. The constant buzzing of the "Vacancy" sign outside continued steadily, like the heartbeat of some giant monster. And I realized with a chilling horror that the sound wasn't caused by the wind. It was coming from inside the sign, as if something was alive within it. The night was long, and I had only been here for 3 hours. But I knew one thing for sure. Timberline Motel wasn't just a normal motel, and its guests, if they could even be called guests, weren't from any place on any map I knew. I sat down, pulled the ledger closer, and began to scrutinize what was written inside. Because if I wanted to survive this probationary week, and now I began to doubt if anyone ever did, I needed to understand what I was up against. And somewhere in the darkness outside, I could swear I heard laughter. Not human laughter, but a dry, cracking sound, like old skin rubbing against itself. And I had a